Hello everybody, my name is Zen, and in this video I'm going to be giving feedback for the first Diablo II Resurrected technical alpha. While the content of this video is more directed at the developers, it also has value for the average viewer because you're going to get a better idea of my specific thoughts and issues with the remaster. And just like I always do, if you happen to be in the technical alpha, I urge you to always fill out any kind of surveys or anything like that that pops up, or bug reports as well. And the reason why is because this is, the best way to get feedback to the devs on a mass level. They're able to look at that data that they receive and, make decisions, or be able to figure out what people's feedback is on the game in a general sense. And I'm going to be doing the exact same thing. In fact, I've already filled out several, including a couple bug reports, but this is just an easier, more direct way for me to use the platform that I have to provide specific feedback for things that I feel like are fixable issues with the remaster. But let's dive right into the feedback, and I'm going to start with all the positive stuff that I think about Resurrected, mostly because that gives a better sense of how I actually feel about the remaster as a whole, rather than like diving in on some things that are specific feedback or nitpicky feedback or just things like that, right? So let's start with the positive stuff. And the first is that the art team has absolutely killed it. Now, I'm sure that the team itself is hearing this feedback 1,000 times every second, because it seems like wherever I look on social media, my peers are all saying the exact same thing, or they're doing the exact same thing I'm doing, which is, they're going through, they're playing Resurrected, and they spot some random doodad or some like pool of water or something like random like that in the world, and they go, ooh, I wonder what this looked like before. And they would switch the graphic modes back to the old stuff. And then they just kind of switch back and forth, and they're like, ooh, and they admire it. I feel like everybody has been doing that. And that's a good thing, right? Because that's what you want it to feel like. You want to feel like the work that you're putting in with the new graphics are flashy and nice, but fit the theme of the old stuff. And players being able to swap back and forth on the fly of what the old stuff looks like and what the new stuff looks like means that you can quickly compare and contrast and get a better idea of, how well the team did in recreating the look of the game to bring it up to modern systems. And it's incredible that it feels exactly the same as it did back then. The look, the atmosphere, the feel of everything just feels like a better looking version of Diablo 2. And I have to say that it's magic. It's literally magic. Like how is this possible to be able to do this with so little flaws, that the team is able to execute this in a way that it just absolutely blows my mind and needs to be applauded. When we played the game back in 2000, when it first came out, the graphics weren't like the best thing that had ever existed back then, but they weren't bad, right? When we played back in 2000, it was a passable game, and your brain filled in a lot of the missing detail, and that's just how games were in general. My first gaming system I ever played on was my NES. And then I had a Sega Genesis, and then I got a PlayStation, but I also played on an Atari ST. And like the games, if you look back at those old games, they were just as bad. They're really, really, really undetailed, super, like grainy graphics. It just wasn't great, right? But for whatever reason, if you think back on games that you played long ago and you haven't played in a while, your brain fills out a lot of what was actually there in the game that didn't really exist. And your brain does the same thing for Diablo 2. For whatever reason, you just, you look at the world, the doodads, whatever, and your brain kind of fills out what that is. And magically, the art team has been able to capture what my brain has filled in. Like, I feel like it's kind of creepy. Like, is this a Truman Show kind of thing going on where it's just weird? But, that's what I'm saying, is that this is the biggest accomplishment of Resurrected, in my opinion, is being able to take that old feel of, you know, the way that the game looks and feels and everything, and being able to just bring that into a modern engine and it's still feeling and looking the exact same way that it did back then, despite the fact that when you switch back and forth between the graphics, it's, ooh, man, sometimes you're like, wow, the game really looked that bad, huh? And it's actually shocking. And here's another good little source of feedback here. I think that the team did a really good job with artistic expression. And I mean, like, extraordinary job, because you sometimes will, you know, be walking past a, you know, in Act 1, you'll be walking past like a stone wall, and you're like, oh, there's like a bunch of moss there, and there's like some wood, and you're like, man, that looks really good. Was that back in the old game too? And you switch, and no, it wasn't. It's just a wall. It's just a stone wall with no detail on it, just stone, just like cobblestone. And the fact that when you switch to the new graphics, it just looks incredible, and it looks like it fits with how Diablo 2 looked. Like, taking artistic expression and making the game look exactly the same is one thing, but also being able to make it look better without going against how the game looked in the past. Like, I know that's kind of a contrived thing, but it's just, I don't know. It's really hard to describe. The game just looks incredible, and the art team absolutely killed it. That is the biggest accomplishment of Resurrected, and that is all the accomplishment it needed to be. But there's also better things, because the game also feels gameplay-wise like it did back then, because of the magic of being able to run the old game in the background and everything else kind of being a facade on top of it, means that, you know, you retain that feel, and that's also a massive accomplishment, because this would have been a really easy remaster, or if it had decided to go down that route, remake, to absolutely ruin, and that has not been the case. So far, it is stunningly perfect. And as a quick aside, this also goes for the sound design within the remaster, because, you know, you'll be fighting a skeleton, for example, in the new engine, and you're fighting and it sounds great, and you switch back, and suddenly the sound, it kind of is a little jarring. You're like, wait a second, with the stuff in the new engine, that's not how it used to sound. I could have sworn that's how it sounded. But you listen to the thing, and it's just, the audio quality is not the greatest on it, and the sound effect that they use, you're like, that feels like generic skeleton. But when you switch to the new stuff, you're like, that's how I remember it sounding. So somehow they've once again gone back into the past, figured out what my brain thought it sounded like, and then just, scaled it up and made it way better. So that is also a huge accomplishment. So far, I have not found a sound effect that I've been like, oof, that doesn't work, that doesn't fit. And the same thing goes for art assets. I haven't found anything that feels like it's out of place. It all feels like it belongs in the world. But then again, we're only going through Act 1 and 2. That may change in the other acts. So far with this technical alpha, everything is executed perfectly. I had put up a video of my general thoughts on Resurrected. And it is essentially that, the game doesn't feel like 10 out of 10. It feels like 11 or 12 out of 10. It feels like it was executed on such a perfect level that you just cannot deny the fact that Diablo 2 was a great game. And when you modernize it with better graphics and sound, that it still lives up to the way that it should, because that game is iconic. It did change the face of isometric action RPGs, and there's no denying the fact that a bunch of games look back on Diablo 2 as their source of inspiration for game development. So in that regard, big round of applause, I'd say, for the Vicarious Visions team who brought this back and brought it to life. I think it, again, is excellent. And even this is switching gears to a different kind of feedback here, but even the stuff that has been added that didn't exist in Diablo 2, such as the feature for auto gold pickup, right? I can definitely see some purists really hating that, but the fact that you can just toggle it on and off makes perfect sense. It definitely is a feature that, in my opinion, is really needed on console or when you're playing with a controller. By the way, controller support is excellent. It works as you would imagine. And if you happen to be a person who has not played Diablo 3 on the console, you actually are missing out because it plays really well. I remember when it first got announced on console, people, including myself, were like, I can't imagine playing an isometric action RPG without a mouse and keyboard, you know, being able to manage my inventory and click to move and all that stuff and being very accurate. But the first time I ever sat down and played Diablo 3 on the console, I was shocked. I was like, actually, this is really nice. This is fun. There is no doubt in my mind that when I play Diablo 3 on my PC, I am more accurate and faster than I am on the console. But that doesn't diminish the console controls at all. They still are fantastic and do exactly what you need them to do, right? So the fact that the controller support for D2 works the way you would expect it to work and works really well is a huge accomplishment within itself. But I do want to talk about very specific, nitpicky little feedbacky things that I think should be either added or changed or, you know, whatever the case may be. And the first thing that, okay, I'm going to be honest, it really annoyed me because it was something that didn't fit with my memory of the game. And it's that I cannot toggle the item names for, you know, the items being on the ground. It on PC by default you hold Alt and it, you know, shows you the items on the ground. But there is no option in the options and there is no way to toggle it so that, you know, you hit Alt once and then everything's popped up and as you walk by it's, you know, it's automatically just shown and then you hit Alt again and it hides. You know, this is a feature that is in Diablo 3 and works just fine in Diablo 3 and is one that I use pretty much permanently. Anytime I don't have the items toggled, it feels wrong. It feels like, you know, like I'm missing a bunch of loot on the ground. But the issue with D2 is that there is no toggle in Resurrected, and there feels like there should be because I would say of two key factors. The first is that the keybind for, you know, showing the items on the ground is Alt. But unfortunately, Alt is a modifier key, right? So, you know, if you Alt Tab, you're going to minimize your game on PC. Or if you're holding Alt, and this is a really annoying one. This is really what got me thinking about this, and it's something that I mentioned when I was streaming the game on Thursday for early access, which, by the way, thank you, Blizzard, for giving me early access. It's that when you're running, right, because in D2, if you didn't know, you have a stamina bar and you can toggle running, or you can just hold control, and which, by the way, is another issue because control is also a modifier key for other keys on your keyboard. But you can either hold control or you could just toggle run with R. Your character will run and it'll drain stamina, right? Well, when you are, you're running, you have your run toggled on because you hit R, and you're holding down Alt because you're trying to look for stuff on the ground, and then your stamina bar runs out. Then you have to let go of Alt in order to hit R. You see where I'm going with this? Because if you hit Alt R, it doesn't work. It doesn't toggle run. But if you hold Alt down and then release it to, hit R to toggle your run, then you have to push Alt again. It just doesn't. Why is that a thing? Okay, so it really just needs to be having an option in the options menu, just like the toggle auto gold pickup, where you can toggle it that if you just tap Alt, it'll just automatically show stuff on the ground, just period. It makes the most sense that, obviously the modifying the keys there is really annoying because, holding Alt and then hitting R doesn't actually toggle run. You have to let go of Alt, but there's also an accessibility reason to have that be the case as well. In modern Diablo, we take that for granted that you could just toggle the item names on and off. but there is an accessibility reason for that. It's, not everybody can hold down a button at any given time while they're playing. And also when it comes to, doing the controller, you got to consider maybe someone's using an adaptive controller because that's the controller they have to use. It just doesn't make sense for having it in the modern game nowadays, 20 years later, to not have this as an accessibility option to begin with, and also just a quality of life feature for people like me who really are not wanting to hold down Alt the entire time. In addition to this, yes, I do know that you could rebind keys, but for the default player, it just doesn't make sense, and it seems like this is something that needs to be added and wouldn't really take a whole lot of development to get that added. But on top of that, it's just like the OSWguild pickup. If you have it toggled, on and off on the options, where you could change it so that way you could keep it old school the way that it is, or you can go back and change it, then I think that would be fine. Now, if there is a way to do this already and I'm missing it, then I apologize, but I tried to look and I tried to do a bunch of different things and I just couldn't get it to work the way that I felt like it should be working. The other nitpicky kind of feedback thing that I have is that why isn't there a full screen windowed mode? Maybe that is planned to be coming in the future, but currently in the tech alpha, there is no full screen windowed, and it just makes sense to be able to have that. It's something that I use for 99% of my games, and it is kind of annoying to have it set to full screen. The good thing is, though, I don't have to completely minimize the game in order to, go over to my other monitor, but, it is annoying that, unlike in D3, for example, because it's the closest parallel that I can make for modern Diablo, in D3, I can have, my game up, and on my second monitor, I can just quickly move my mouse over there and click as I need to. That's annoying for some people because if you're clicking around, you're playing Diablo, maybe you don't want your mouse going over to the other screen, but just making it have an option to bound your cursor, would be pretty easy. But the thing is that the full screen windowed is really nice for people like me as a content creator who do constantly need to go over to my other monitor for various reasons. So yeah, it's just a weird little annoyance thing. Maybe it's coming, maybe it's not, but that's just my feedback of I feel like it's missing, and that is something that specifically I would really like, even though I don't think a lot of people are going to be clamoring for it. And the last specific point of feedback that I have is something that I know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get ahead of this. I know that it is not something that will necessarily ever come to the game, because I generally understand both the technical limitations and the limitations of how certain companies are behaving and work. But in general, it would be really nice to see cross-play be a thing, because cross-progression, totally a thing, gonna work, gonna be nice. It's gonna be nice to be able to play, on my PC, and then if I have to take a trip, switch over to a Nintendo Switch and be able to continue playing, right? But I have two avenues for why I think cross-play would be really nice to see. And again, I understand that this is a thing that we may never see in Diablo II Resurrected, but these are just my arguments for why I think there should be some effort into trying to see if we can get that to be more of a thing. The first is a personal aspect. I have people that I know that like to play Diablo on the console, and it would be nice for me to be able to play Diablo 2 with them. Am I going to go out of my way to go jump on a console to play with them? Probably not. It would be nice to be able to play from my PC, because that's going to be my preferred method of play, unless, I'm forced to jump on a console. And in some cases, actually in maybe a lot of cases, depending on the life situation, it may be kind of nice to just get off my PC and go get on the console and play. But I don't want to just get on the console to play with people that I know in real life, right? I want to be able to play with them from wherever I am at. So just as a personal level, yes, it would be nice to have crossplay enabled. The second avenue is definitely one that nobody shares, but it is one that is very specific, and it would be nice to see cross-play be enabled, because me, as a person who helps run a fan site, right? I run Diablo Fans, for those who don't know, and it is a really nice way for the community to come and, get together and share their love for Diablo by, being able to go on a site and be able to look up builds and whatnot. It's nice to have that, core community there. What's not nice, and what is something that we experience every single Diablo 3 season, is people not being able to play together. We have a looking for group channel in our official Discord for it. And you have people who look for groups, for playing on console, and you have people who look for groups playing on PC, but you never get them playing together. And that's a shame. And I see this literally every single season in Diablo 3. These people who would actually play together and could forge some amazing friendships if they could play together, being unable to, just because they're playing on a different platform. Now, with Diablo 3, that's the crossplay thing. That's not going to happen. I get that. But with Diablo 2, the fact that there is cross progression does give me hope that one day there could be crossplay, because I hate seeing these connections that could be made. It's like you're watching. This is kind of weird. You're people watching in a park, and you see two people, off doing their own thing separately, who looks like they're both interested in the exact same stuff, and you're thinking in your head, oh man, those two people could probably be friends. Like, they both look interested in the same stuff, they both kind of have the same thing going on about them. You're like, man, you guys could actually be friends. But then they just walk past each other, and you're like, why? Like, talk to each other, and you can't do anything about it. It's kind of like that, watching on Discord with Diablo Fans, just watching these people who could potentially play with each other being not able to do so just because of a really obscure border that has been drawn from, years of console wars, and just the infrastructure thing of, playing PC versus console, and how does that all work together? I know it's complicated, and some companies have figured it out. Others, there's just way more complicated than that. You just can't. But for this, because there is cross progression, it does give me hope that there could potentially be cross play, just so we can get people playing together in a game that we all enjoy. And to wrap up my feedback, I do have one little bug that I want to talk about that I came across. And it was one of those things that I tried to replicate, but I was even having issues trying to figure out why it started happening in the first place. But it is something, obviously, I want to talk about. Oh, and just real quick, as a bit of a background, I've worked in QA before, and I've worked in localization. So I tried a bunch of different things. So here was the issue. I, for whatever reason, suddenly could not open up my follower inventory by right-clicking on the portrait. It just stopped working randomly, like absolutely out of nowhere. I'm just playing, and I go to open up the inventory, and I'm like, what just happened? It just stopped working. Using O, which is the default key to open it up, worked just fine. I tried switching back and forth between the old and new graphics. That didn't change anything. Wouldn't open if I right-clicked on it either way, which tells me that was not an issue with the facade that is hanging over the game running in the background, right? I also tried other things. I tried toggling run and seeing if that was an issue. I tried making sure Control and Alt weren't being held down by any means, and trying to right-click on the portrait that way. I just made sure that no keys on my keyboard were being pressed, like shadow pressed or anything like that. That also didn't work. I tried going back to town. That didn't fix it. Going back to town and then back out, and then back to town and then back out again didn't fix it. Transitioning, going from one zone to another using waypoints didn't fix it. What did fix it was going from Act 1 to Act 2. I don't know what changes. I don't know how the game decides to load in the new assets or, anything like that, how it's offloading, or it doesn't matter. All I know is that was the only thing that fixed it. I'm sure if I had left the game and come back, based on me being able to go from Act 1 to Act 2 and then it fixing it, I'm sure that would have also fixed it. But it was just a bug that I encountered, and I bug reported just in case. So yeah, just a weird one, very obscure. It's just like I don't understand what caused it, and that's the problem. Is I couldn't pinpoint when it started happening, which means I couldn't pinpoint what caused it. But thank you very much for watching through my feedback. I tried to keep it short, but I also tried to put enough detail in there that my thoughts get across in a coherent way. That doesn't always happen, but I tried my best. If you're new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe. It definitely helps out a lot, and hit the like button if you liked what I had to say about the first technical alpha. My plan is to jump in with future technical alphas and give plenty of feedback and do plenty of testing, because Diablo II Resurrected is a game I am quite passionate about. If you happen to be new and you haven't seen, I also did a bunch of stuff on Diablo Immortal when that technical alpha happened back in December, so you guys can go check that out. I will put a link to it in the comments, and I'll also put a link to the live stream I did of Diablo 2 for the technical alpha, this first one as well. So that way there's plenty of Diablo content for you to jump onto. But with all of that being said, thank you very much for watching, and we shall see you guys next time.